Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The scent of pine and wet earth should have been comforting, but tonight it carried the weight of 1,000 judgments. I stood at the edge of the gathering clearing, my pale blonde hair catching the last rays of dying sunlight like a beacon I desperately wished I could extinguish. The harvest moon gathering, a celebration meant to honor the pack's strength, fertility, and future, felt more like a trial where I'd already been found wanting. Around me, wolves moved with the fluid grace of those who belonged. Their laughter rang through the evening air, sharp and crystalline, while I remained still as stone, trying to make myself smaller, invisible. It never worked. Being different has a way of announcing itself no matter how quietly you try to exist. "She'll never shift," someone whispered, not bothering to lower their voice enough. 23 years old and still human. What a waste of alpha blood. I'd heard worse. The daughter of a fallen alpha, born without the ability to transform, raised by a pack that saw me as a beautiful mistake. A reminder that even the strongest bloodlines could produce something broken. My fingers traced the rough bark of the oak tree beside me, finding comfort in its solidity, its refusal to bend to the wind's demands. My mother had died bringing me into this world, and my father followed her 6 years later, his heart giving out from what the pack healers called exhaustion, but what I knew was grief. They'd left me with nothing but pale hair like moonlight, green eyes that saw too much, and a stubborn insistence that I belonged here despite all evidence to the contrary. The elders had debated sending me away. For her own safety, they'd said, as if exile wrapped in kind words would hurt less. But Elder Miriam, weathered and sharp as winter wind, had argued that my father's sacrifice for the pack earned me a place, even if I'd never run with them under the full moon. "You have a different kind of strength," she'd told me once, her gnarled fingers gentle on my shoulder. "The world needs those who can walk between spaces, who understand what it means to be other. Don't let them convince you that transformation is the only form of power." I'd clung to those words like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. The crowd shifted, a ripple of awareness moving through the gathered wolves like wind through wheat. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the children stopped their games, turning toward the northern path with an instinct I'd never possess. He was coming. I'd never seen him in person. The Alpha King who ruled not just our pack, but the entire northern territories. His reputation arrived long before he did, ruthless in battle, brilliant in strategy, and utterly alone, despite being surrounded by thousands who would die at his command. They said he'd lost his mate years ago, that something in him had turned to ice after her death, that he attended these gatherings out of duty, but never stayed longer than protocol demanded. The trees seemed to lean away as he emerged from the forest path. Caspian nightshade moved like violence contained in flesh, each step deliberate and economical. He was taller than I'd imagined, broad-shouldered in a way that spoke of both power and the burden of carrying it. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and even from this distance, I could see the sharp planes of his face, handsome in the way that storms are beautiful, dangerous and compelling in equal measure. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Even across the clearing, I felt the weight of them, amber shot through with gold, ancient and tired, and searching for something he'd long since stopped believing he'd find. The pack bowed, a wave of submission that moved through the crowd like a choreographed dance I'd never learned the steps to. I lowered my head because not doing so would be stupid, but something rebellious in me kept my eyes raised just enough to watch him move through his subjects, like a king inspecting troops before battle. He paused to speak with the current pack alpha, a gruff man named Garrett who'd taken leadership after my father's death, and had made it clear I existed in his territory on borrowed time. Their conversation was brief, formal, the kind of exchange that conveyed information without revealing anything true. Then Caspian's gaze swept the clearing. I should have looked away. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to drop my eyes, to become just another face in the crowd. But something held me frozen. Maybe curiosity, maybe defiance, maybe just exhaustion with always making myself smaller. His eyes found mine. The world contracted to that single point of connection. I watched something flicker across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of something he couldn't name. The amber of his irises seemed to glow brighter, and for a heartbeat, I could have sworn I saw his wolf rise to the surface, pressing against the boundaries of his human form. The moment stretched like honey poured in winter, slow and golden and thick with possibility. Then Garrett stepped into his line of sight, breaking the connection with talk of territory disputes and rogue problems. And I could breathe again. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape the cage of my chest. What was that? Had he felt it too? That strange pull, like gravity had shifted and rearranged itself around us? Who's that? Caspian's voice cut through Garrett's rambling, low and rough as gravel, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command attention. I couldn't hear Garrett's response, but I watched the pack alpha's expression shift to something uncomfortable, almost apologetic. He gestured vaguely in my direction, and I caught fragments carried on the evening breeze. Daughter of the former alpha. Unfortunate situation. Can't shift. We've allowed her to remain out of respect. Each phrase landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of shame through my chest. This was my existence distilled to its essence. A problem to be explained, an allowance to be justified, a courtesy extended to the memory of a man who'd been more than I could ever hope to be. Caspian's gaze returned to me, and this time there was something different in his expression. Not pity, thank the moon, not pity, but assessment. He looked at me the way a general might study unexpected terrain, trying to determine if I was an obstacle or an opportunity. The harvest moon celebration began in earnest, and I faded back into the shadows where I belonged. Wolves shifted and ran, their joy and transformation a language I'd never speak. I watched from the edges, as I always did, part of the scenery but never part of the scene. But I felt his attention like heat against my skin. Even when I couldn't see him, I knew he was aware of me, tracking my movement through the crowd with that uncanny awareness alphas possessed. It should have frightened me. Instead, it made me feel visible for the first time in years. Truly seen. Not just tolerated or pitied. The feast tables groaned under the weight of roasted meat and fresh bread, autumn vegetables and sweet cakes made with honey and cinnamon. I took a plate because not eating would draw attention, but the food tasted like ash in my mouth. Around me, pack members laughed and told stories, their voices blending into a chorus of belonging I couldn't join. You shouldn't be here. The voice came from behind me. Sienna, a she-wolf 3 years my junior, who'd always taken particular pleasure in reminding me of my inadequacy. She was beautiful in the way wolves often were, all lean muscle and predatory grace, her dark hair braided with autumn leaves in honor of the season. I didn't turn around. Elder Miriam said I could attend. Elder Miriam is soft. The Alpha King is here, and you're an embarrassment to the entire pack. What if he asks questions? What if he decides our alpha is weak for harboring someone like you? Someone like you. As if I was a disease, a moral failing, a choice rather than an accident of birth. Then I suppose that's between him and Garrett, I said quietly, proud that my voice didn't shake. Sienna moved into my peripheral vision, her eyes flashing with gold, her wolf close to the surface, aggressive and eager for confrontation. You should leave. Go back to your cottage and let the real wolves celebrate. I'm not looking for trouble, Sienna. You are trouble. Your very existence is trouble. The confrontation was drawing attention now. I could feel eyes turning toward us, feel the weight of judgment and curiosity pressing against my skin. This was how it always went. I tried to exist quietly, and someone always needed to put me in my place, to remind me that tolerance wasn't the same as acceptance. Is there a problem here? The voice rolled through the clearing like thunder before a storm, and every wolf in a 20-foot radius immediately submitted. Even Sienna, for all her bravado, dropped her gaze and stepped back, her body language screaming apology and deference. Caspian Nightshade stood 3 feet away, and up close he was overwhelming. He radiated authority the way the sun radiates heat, effortlessly, constantly, inescapably. His scent hit me like a physical force, pine and smoke and something darker, something that spoke of midnight hunts and blood on snow. "No, Alpha King," Sienna managed, her earlier confidence evaporating. "Just a misunderstanding." His eyes never left my face. "I don't believe I was asking you." The dismissal was absolute. Sienna fled like smoke in wind, leaving me alone with the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, while every member of my pack watched with expressions ranging from shock to horror to dark satisfaction. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt strangely calm, like standing in the eye of a hurricane where the world goes quiet and still. "What's your name?" His voice was gentler than I'd expected, though no less commanding. "Ember," I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. "Ember Ashford." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps. "Ashford, Thomas Ashford's daughter. You knew my father?" "I knew of him. He was a good alpha. Died too young." Caspian tilted his head, studying me with that unsettling intensity. "They say you can't shift." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "No, I'm human." "Are you?" The question caught me off guard. What else would I be?" "That," he said softly, "is an interesting question." Before I could ask what he meant, Garrett appeared at Caspian's elbow, his expression carefully neutral, but his anxiety rolling off him in waves. "Alpha King, the council requests your presence for the—" "In a moment," Caspian said without looking away from me. "The dismissal of an alpha by the Alpha King." I watched Garrett's jaw tighten, watched him swallow whatever protest he'd been forming. "Of course. We'll be in the council lodge when you're ready." We stood in silence as Garrett retreated, the weight of 100 stairs pressing against my back. I should have excused myself, should have bowed and disappeared into the shadows where I belonged. Instead, I held his gaze and waited to see what this terrifying, fascinating man wanted from me. "Walk with me," he said finally. It wasn't a request. He turned and moved toward the forest path, and after a heartbeat's hesitation, I followed. Behind us, I heard the explosion of whispers, felt the shock and speculation rippling through the pack like wildfire. The Alpha King didn't walk with anyone. He certainly didn't walk with broken human girls who couldn't even shift. The sounds of the celebration faded as we moved deeper into the trees. The moon was rising now, full and heavy and silver, painting the forest in shades of ash and pearl. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable but charged with something I couldn't name. Finally, when we'd walked far enough that the party was just a distant murmur, he stopped in a small clearing where moonlight pooled like water. "Why do you stay?" he asked, turning to face me. The question was so unexpected that I answered honestly, because leaving would feel like admitting they're right, that I don't belong anywhere. "And do you? Belong?" I thought about Elder Miriam's words, about my father's memory, about the small cottage at the edge of pack territory that was equal parts sanctuary and prison. "I don't know, but I'm tired of running from the question." Something in his expression softened, just slightly, like ice beginning to thaw at the edges. "Your father, did he teach you about the old ways? The stories before the packs, when humans and wolves walked together?" "Some. He used to say that the strongest bonds were built on choice, not instinct. That love given freely was worth more than 1,000 fated mates." The words hurt to speak, remembering his voice in the darkness of my childhood, trying to make me understand that I wasn't less, just different. Caspian moved closer, and my heart rate kicked up despite my best efforts to remain calm. He was studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, and standing this close, I could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the weight of too many years making too many impossible choices. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "Neither are you." His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "What did you expect? Someone colder, more distant." "I am cold. I am distant." But his voice held something that might have been regret. "It's safer that way. For everyone." "Safer than what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of pale hair back from my face. His fingers were warm, calloused, gentle in a way that seemed at odds with everything I'd heard about the ruthless Alpha King. "You should be afraid of me," he murmured. "I know. But you're not. No." "Why?" I thought about that. About standing in this moonlit clearing with the most dangerous man I'd ever met. About the strange sense of recognition that had passed between us the moment our eyes met. Because I think you understand what it's like to be alone in a crowd, to wear a mask so well that you forget what your real face looks like. His hand dropped, and for a moment, I saw something raw in his expression. Surprise and pain, and a loneliness so deep it made my chest ache. "You see too much," he said, and it sounded like both accusation and relief. "It's easier to see others when you're invisible yourself." He laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. "Is that what you think you are? Invisible? Isn't it what I am?" "No, Ember Ashford." His voice dropped lower, intimate and dangerous and promising. "You are the furthest thing from invisible I've ever encountered." The air between us felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, could feel heat rising in my cheeks despite the cool night air. Then, from the direction of the gathering, a howl split the night, long and urgent and wrong. Not celebration, warning. Caspian's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The man disappeared, replaced by the warrior king. "Stay here," he commanded, already moving. "What is it?" "Rogues." He was running now, faster than any human could move, and I watched him shift mid-stride. Bones reorganizing, muscle reforming, until a massive black wolf the size of a small horse raced toward danger. I stood alone in the clearing, my heart hammering, wondering what I'd just stumbled into, and why the Alpha King's final glance back at me had felt less like goodbye, and more like a promise. I should have stayed in that clearing, should have followed Caspian's command like any sensible person would, when the Alpha King himself gives an order. Instead, I found myself running toward the sounds of chaos, toward snarling and screaming, and the sharp metallic scent of blood on the wind. The gathering had descended into controlled pandemonium. Wolves shifted and formed defensive positions around the young and elderly, while warriors streamed toward the eastern perimeter where shadows moved wrong. Too many, too fast, too coordinated for a random rogue attack. "Get to the safe house!" Garrett was shouting, his wolf form massive and scarred, coordinating the defense with practiced efficiency. "Protect the children!" But I saw what others missed. 3 rogue wolves breaking from the main assault, circling wide through the forest toward the undefended western edge, where mothers were ushering pups toward safety. They'd planned this. A frontal assault to draw defenders, then strike where we were weakest. My body moved before my mind caught up. I grabbed a fallen branch, thick as my arm and solid, and ran parallel to the rogues' path, using the forest cover they thought protected them. I couldn't shift, couldn't fight like they did, but I'd spent 23 years navigating these woods, learning every root and stone and hidden trail. I knew something they didn't. The western path had a choke point where the trees grew close and the ground dropped away on one side. If I could get there first, maybe. The lead rogue burst through the underbrush just as I reached the narrow passage. His eyes were wild, foam flecking his muzzle, not just rogue, but rabid with something that made my stomach turn. Whatever drove these wolves wasn't natural hunger or territory dispute. This was something darker. He saw me and lunged, dismissing me as threat or obstacle in the same instant. A mistake. I swung the branch with everything I had, catching him across the snout with a crack that sent vibrations up my arms. He yelped, stumbling, and in that moment of confusion, I used his own momentum against him, stepping aside and shoving him toward the drop-off with my shoulder. He went over with a surprised yelp, rolling 15 feet down the rocky slope. The second rogue was smarter. He approached cautiously, teeth bared, assessing this strange human who dared stand between him and easier prey. Behind him, I heard children crying, mothers calling out in fear. "You'll have to go through me," I said. surprised by the steadiness in my voice. He gathered himself to spring, and Caspian's massive black wolf slammed into him from the side with the force of an avalanche. They rolled in a tangle of fur and fangs, but the fight was over almost before it began. Caspian's jaws closed on the rogue's throat, and the wolf went limp. The third rogue took one look at the Alpha King and fled. The attack ended as suddenly as it began. In the distance, I heard the retreating howls of rogues being driven back, pursued by pack warriors emboldened by their king's presence. The clearing began to calm, wolves checking on pack members, assessing damage, counting the living. Caspian shifted back to human form, a process I'd never witnessed up close. One moment wolf, the next man. He was breathing hard, blood splattered across his bare chest. Not his own, I thought. His amber eyes found me immediately. I told you to stay. I know. You could have been killed, but I wasn't. Something that might have been frustration or admiration or both flickered across his face. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can't I be both? This time, he did smile, small and fleeting, but real. Come, you're bleeding. I looked down at my arm, surprised to find my sleeve torn and a long scratch welling red. I hadn't even felt it happen. It's nothing. Let me be the judge of that. His hand closed around my wrist, warm and steady, and he led me toward the healing lodge. The pack parted for us like water around stone. I felt their stares, heard the whispers following in our wake. The human girl who couldn't shift, walking side by side with the Alpha King, his hand still circling her wrist like it belonged there. Elder Miriam met us at the lodge entrance, her weathered face creased with concern and something else. Calculation, perhaps. Bring her inside. I'll tend to her. But Caspian didn't release me. I'll handle it. Miriam's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline, but she stepped aside. As you wish, Alpha King. The healing lodge smelled of herbs and smoke and old wood. Caspian guided me to a bench near the fire, then gathered supplies with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Clean water, cloth, a salve that smelled of honey and something sharper. You've done this before, I observed. I've been king for 15 years. I've tended more wounds than I can count. He knelt in front of me, taking my arm gently. His hands were steady as he cleaned the wound, careful despite their size. This will sting. It did. But I didn't flinch. I watched him work instead, studying the sharp line of his jaw, the silver threading his temples, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. Up close, I could see the cost of leadership written in every line of his face, the weight of decisions that kept him awake at night, the loneliness that came from standing above everyone else. Why did you help me tonight? I asked softly. His hands paused. You needed help. So did a dozen others, but you came for me. He finished wrapping my arm in silence, his touch lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. When he finally looked up, his eyes held that same strange intensity I'd seen in the clearing. Because when I saw you standing there, alone, armed with nothing but a branch, protecting children that aren't even yours, I saw something I thought I'd never see again. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Courage without calculation. Compassion without expectation of reward. You risked your life for people who've spent years making you feel worthless. They're still my pack. That's my point. He rose, putting distance between us, as if proximity made him say things he shouldn't. You're more wolf than half the warriors out there, whether you can shift or not. The words settled into my chest, warm and unexpected. No one had ever said anything like that to me, had ever suggested that belonging wasn't about transformation but about choice. Before I could respond, Garrett burst through the door, his expression thunderous. Alpha King, the rogues are being dealt with, Caspian said calmly. Your warriors performed well. Yes, but... Garrett's eyes found me, narrowed. What is she doing here? Being tended to. She was injured defending your pack's young. She shouldn't have been in the fight at all. She's human. She could have... She saved lives tonight. Caspian's voice hardened, taking on the edge of command that made even Alpha's bow. Perhaps you should be thanking her instead of questioning her presence. Garrett's jaw worked, caught between deference to the Alpha King and clear displeasure at being contradicted. Of course. My Apologies. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. We'll discuss the attack in the morning, Caspian continued. Have your warriors patrol in shifts. I'll be staying through tomorrow to ensure there are no further incidents. Staying. The word sent an unexpected thrill through my chest. After Garrett left, radiating suppressed anger, Caspian turned back to me. You should rest. Tomorrow will bring questions you may not enjoy answering. What kind of questions? The kind that come when someone breaks pattern. When invisible becomes visible. He moved toward the door, then paused. Ember, what you did tonight. Don't diminish it. Don't let them make you believe it was foolish or worthless. Why do you care? The question escaped before I could stop it. He looked back at me, and in his eyes, I saw loneliness echo my own. Because I remember what it's like to be different, to carry power no one wants to acknowledge, to be useful only when convenient. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the crackling fire and the echo of words that felt like understanding. Morning came too quickly, bringing cold sunshine and the harsh reality of consequence. I woke in my small cottage at the edge of pack territory, the same cottage my father had built with his own hands, positioned far enough from the center to give me privacy, but close enough to remind everyone I still existed. The events of the previous night felt dreamlike. The attack, the fighting, Caspian's hands gentle on my wounded arm. But the bandage was real, and so was the summons. A young wolf named Finn, one of Garrett's messengers, waited at my door, his expression apologetic. Council wants to see you. They're not happy. When are they ever? I pulled on my worn jacket, braided my pale hair back. Let's not keep them waiting. The council lodge sat at the heart of pack territory, a building older than anyone could remember, its walls carved with the history of our people in symbols and stories. I'd been inside exactly 3 times in my life. Once when my father died, once when Elder Miriam argued for my right to stay, and once when I turned 18 and was formally tolerated. Today would be the 4th. The council sat in a semicircle, 5 elders plus Garrett, their faces ranging from stern to openly hostile. Elder Miriam sat at the far end, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes warm when they found mine. Ember Ashford, Garrett began, his voice formal. You're here to answer for your actions last night. I defended the pack. You endangered yourself and violated protocol, snapped Elder Rowan, a bitter man who'd never forgiven my father for some ancient slight. You have no training, no ability to shift, no business inserting yourself into pack defense. She saved 3 children, Miriam countered quietly. I'd say that gives her every business. She got lucky, Garrett said, and in doing so, she drew the attention of the Alpha King. Do you have any idea what kind of questions he's been asking? About her? About her father? About why we've kept a human among us? So that's what this was about, not my safety, not protocol. Fear that Caspian's interest would expose whatever insecurities Garrett harbored about his leadership. What would you have me do? I asked, proud that my voice didn't shake. Should I have let those rogues reach the children? You should have trusted the warriors to handle it. The warriors were occupied. Someone had to act. You are not someone. Rowan's fist slammed the table. You are a human girl playing at being pack. Last night was a vivid reminder that you don't belong in our world. The words landed like blows, each one designed to wound, to remind me of my place. I felt my throat tighten, felt the familiar burn of tears I refused to shed in front of them. Enough. The voice came from the doorway, low and dangerous and absolute. Caspian filled the entrance like a storm-given form, his presence sucking the air from the room. Every council member immediately submitted, heads bowing, eyes dropping. Everyone except me. I held his gaze and saw fury there, cold and controlled and directed entirely at the men who'd been dissecting my worth. Alpha King, Garrett managed, recovering first. We weren't expecting, clearly. Caspian moved into the room, his attention never leaving me. I came to inform you that I'll be conducting a full investigation into last night's attack. The rogues were organized, targeted, and showed signs of external influence. External influence? Miriam leaned forward, her interest sharp. Someone sent them. This wasn't random violence. Caspian's jaw tightened. Which means your pack may still be in danger. I'll be remaining here for several days to oversee security and determine who wanted your people harmed. The implications settled over the room like snow, cold and suffocating. Someone had targeted this pack specifically. Someone with resources and reach. We're honored by your protection, Alpha King, Garrett said carefully. Whatever you need, I need your cooperation and your trust. Caspian's eyes found mine again. I'll also need guides familiar with the territory, people who know these woods intimately, of course. I can assign. I want Ember. The silence that followed was absolute. Alpha King, Garrett said slowly, clearly choosing his words with care. Surely there are more qualified. Are you questioning my judgment? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Garrett paled, realizing he'd walked to the edge of a cliff he hadn't seen coming. No, of course not. If you want Ember, then I do. Caspian's voice softened slightly, but the command remained. She knows this territory. She proved last night she can handle herself, and I trust her. I trust her. 3 words that meant more than any pretty speech or flowery compliment ever could. Then it settled. He turned to me, and something in his expression shifted, became almost gentle. Meet me at the eastern border in an hour. Bring anything you'll need for several days in the woods. Several days? The question escaped before I could stop it. Yes. His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. Is that a problem? No. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. No problem at all. He left as abruptly as he'd arrived, leaving chaos in his wake. The council erupted into urgent whispers the moment he was gone, their voices overlapping. What is he thinking? This is unprecedented, a human guiding the Alpha King. I didn't stay to hear more. I left the lodge with my head high and my heart hammering, wondering what I'd just agreed to, and why the prospect of spending days alone in the forest with Caspian Nightshade felt less like danger and more like destiny. The eastern border marked where cultivated packland surrendered to wild forest, ancient pines that had witnessed centuries of wolf territory disputes, their roots deep enough to remember when humans and wolves weren't separate species, but something fluid and undefined. I arrived with a worn backpack containing supplies for 3 days. Maybe 4, if I rationed carefully. Practical clothes, a knife my father had given me, dried food, and a blanket that smelled like home. Everything I owned fit in that pack with room to spare, a life condensed to essentials. Caspian was already there, speaking in low tones with 2 of his personal guard, wolves I recognized by reputation if not by face. Darius, his second in command, was built like a mountain with warm brown skin and eyes that missed nothing. Beside him stood Vera, a female warrior whose reputation for strategy was matched only by her ruthlessness in combat. Want perimeter patrols doubled, Caspian was saying, and I want to know who's been trading with outsiders in the past 6 months. Someone let information slip about pack movements. You think this was planned that far in advance? Vera's voice was sharp, intelligent. I think whoever orchestrated this knew exactly when we'd be vulnerable. The Harvest Moon gathering isn't secret, but the timing. He trailed off, noticing my approach. Something in his expression shifted, softened, almost imperceptibly. You came. You commanded it. I requested it. There's a difference. He turned to his guards. You have your orders. Report anything unusual directly to me. Darius's eyes flickered between us, curiosity evident despite his professional demeanor. And you, my king? Where will you be? Following a trail only someone who truly knows this forest can track. Caspian shouldered his own pack, considerably more sophisticated than mine, all sleek fabric and organized compartments. We'll check in at sundown. Vera opened her mouth as if to protest, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, she simply bowed. Be careful, Alpha King. Always am. As we walked away from the border, I felt their eyes on my back, assessing, questioning, wondering what their king saw in a human girl that warranted this kind of attention. I wondered the same thing. You don't have to do this, I said, once we were deep enough in the trees that voices wouldn't carry. If this is some kind of pity, it's not. He moved through the forest with surprising grace for someone so large, barely disturbing the undergrowth. I told you, I trust you. There aren't many people I can say that about. You barely know me. Sometimes you know people in a heartbeat. Sometimes it takes years and you never really know them at all. He paused, studying the ground. The rogues came from the northeast. I tracked them before dawn, but the trail goes cold about 3 miles in. Someone covered their tracks, someone skilled. I knelt beside him, studying the disturbed earth. He was right. The obvious trail ended abruptly, replaced by carefully swept ground and displaced leaves. But there was something else, something most wouldn't notice. There, I pointed to a cluster of ferns. See how they're bent? Not broken, but bent at the base. Someone pushed through here trying to mask their passing, but ferns spring back differently than underbrush. They leave a pattern. Caspian followed my gesture, then looked at me with undisguised admiration. How did you? I've spent 23 years learning to see what others miss. When you can't rely on wolf senses, you develop different ones. I moved forward, reading the subtle signs. They went this way, deliberately avoiding the obvious paths. We walked in companionable silence, following a trail only I could see clearly. The forest deepened around us, sunlight filtering through in scattered coins of gold. Birds sang overhead, oblivious to the darker purposes that had stained these woods the night before. Your father taught you this? Caspian asked after a while. Some. The rest I learned from necessity. I ducked under a low branch. When you're the weakest member of the pack, you learn to navigate carefully, to see threats before they see you. You're not weak. Tell that to every wolf who's ever looked at me. He caught my arm gently, stopping me. I'm telling it to you. Strength isn't just physical power or the ability to shift. It's resilience, adaptability, the courage to keep showing up even when the world tells you you're not enough. His thumb traced the bandage on my arm. You have more of that than anyone I've met in a long time. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I'd spent so long being dismissed that genuine recognition felt foreign, almost painful in its sweetness. Why are you really here? I asked softly. Alpha Kings don't personally investigate every rogue attack. No, he admitted. They don't. So why this one? He was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. Because 15 years ago I lost someone I loved to an attack I should have seen coming. Rogues, we thought. Random violence. But it wasn't random. It was orchestrated by enemies who wanted to weaken me, who knew the fastest way to break an alpha was to take away what he loved most. My breath caught. Your mate. Elena. Her name was barely a whisper. She was everything light and good. Patient where I was harsh, gentle where I was brutal. She balanced me in ways I didn't appreciate until she was gone. His jaw tightened. They made it look like an accident, like she was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I found evidence later, too late, that it was planned, executed. A message. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just understand why I take threats seriously now. Why I won't let another pack suffer what mine did. He met my eyes. And why last night, when I saw the coordination of that attack, I recognized the pattern. Someone is using the same playbook, which means someone from that time is still active, still dangerous. The revelation settled over me like a cold wind. This wasn't just about protecting one pack. This was about hunting ghosts from Caspian's past, about finally finishing something that had haunted him for 15 years. You think they're targeting you again? I said, using this pack as bait. I think they're testing defenses, seeing who's loyal, who's vulnerable, where the cracks are. He resumed walking, his expression grim. And I think they specifically chose a pack with a weak alpha and internal divisions. Garrett. Garrett is competent in peace, but untested in real crisis, and he's more concerned with appearance than substance. Caspian glanced at me, which is why someone like you, someone with actual courage but no political ambition, becomes valuable. You see clearly, because you have nothing to gain from deception. We walked for hours, following the ghost trail deeper into forest that grew progressively wilder. This was old territory, the kind wolves avoided because something ancient still lingered here. Not dangerous exactly, but other. The trees grew taller, their canopy thick enough to turn afternoon into twilight. "We should make camp," Caspian said finally. "We're far enough out that continuing in darkness would be foolish." He was right. The trail had led us to a small clearing beside a stream that sang over smooth stones. The water was crystalline, cold enough to make my teeth ache when I cupped my hands to drink. Caspian moved with practiced efficiency, building a fire, checking the perimeter, setting up a basic camp. I helped where I could, gathering wood and filling our water bottles. We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that speaks of unexpected compatibility. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge through the canopy, we sat across from each other with the fire crackling between us. I'd brought dried meat and bread. He produced vegetables and cheese that made my mouth water. We shared the food without discussion, an impromptu feast under the watching stars. "Can I ask you something?" I ventured after we'd eaten. "You can ask anything. Why did you never take another mate? 15 years is a long time to be alone." His expression shuddered slightly, but he didn't evade the question. "Because I'm not sure I could survive losing someone like that again. Because being alone is safer. Because," he trailed off, staring into the fire. "Because no one ever looked at me the way Elena did. Like I was more than a weapon or a crown. Like I was just Caspian. I imagine that's lonely." "Imagine?" He looked up, and there was something raw in his gaze. "You don't have to imagine, do you? You know exactly what it's like to be seen as a symbol, a problem to solve or a pity to extend, rather than a person." The accuracy of that statement stole my breath. "Yes. That's why—" He stopped himself, shook his head. "Why what?" "Why I keep finding excuses to talk to you, to be near you." The confession came out rough, almost reluctant, because when you look at me, I don't see calculation. I don't see someone trying to gain favor or position. I just see honesty. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Caspian, I know it's inappropriate. I know I have no right to say these things to you. You're young enough to be—" He laughed bitterly. "Well, significantly younger, and I'm your king, and this entire situation is complicated beyond measure. I'm 23, not a child," I said quietly. "And I don't care about appropriate. I care about honest." "Then honestly?" He leaned forward, firelight playing across his features, making him look younger and older all at once. "I haven't felt anything but duty and grief for 15 years. And then I saw you standing at the edge of that gathering, this pale-haired girl who was supposed to be invisible, and something in me woke up, something I thought had gone silent forever. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Could only feel the weight of his words settling into my chest like stones in water, sinking deep. "I don't know what to do with that," I admitted. "Neither do I." He smiled sadly. "But I wanted you to know. Whatever else happens, whatever we find out here, I wanted you to know you're not invisible to me. You never were." The moment stretched between us, heavy with possibility and danger. I wanted to cross that distance, to close the space the fire created. Wanted to prove to myself this was real, not some dream I'd wake from alone in my cottage. But before either of us could move, a sound split the night, distant but unmistakable. A howl. Not one of celebration or communication. A hunting call. Caspian was on his feet instantly, his body tensing, eyes scanning the darkness beyond our fire. "That's not one of mine, or mine," I whispered. Another howl answered the first, then another, surrounding us in a loose circle, closing slowly. "How many?" I asked, grabbing my knife, pathetically small but better than nothing. He tilted his head, listening with senses I'd never possess. 6. Maybe 7. Coordinated. His voice dropped. "They followed us. Someone knew we'd come out here. What do we do?" He looked at me then, and in his eyes, I saw the Alpha King, ancient, powerful, and utterly ruthless when protecting what was his. "We survive. Together." Then he shifted, bones and muscle reforming in that impossible, beautiful way, and the massive black wolf stood between me and the darkness, teeth bared, ready to defend. and I realized with absolute clarity I would fight beside him. Not behind him, not sheltered by him, beside him. The first rogue burst from the trees, and the forest erupted into violence. Time fractured into heartbeats and instinct. The first rogue, a mottled gray beast with eyes that gleamed too bright, too fevered, lunged for me. Caspian intercepted mid-leap, jaws closing with bone-crushing force. They rolled across the clearing in a tangle of fur and fury, while I pressed my back against a tree, knife raised, watching the darkness for the next attack. It came from my left. I dropped and rolled, feeling claws whistle past where my head had been. The rogue, smaller, faster, pivoted with terrifying speed, but I'd spent years learning to fight without strength, relying instead on angles and leverage and sheer stubborn refusal to die easily. When he lunged again, I didn't retreat. I stepped inside his arc, driving my knife upward into the soft tissue beneath his jaw. The blade wasn't silver, wasn't enchanted, but it was sharp, and I was desperate. He yelped and staggered back, giving me seconds to reposition. Caspian finished his opponent and was already moving toward the next threat. Around us, the forest had become a nightmare of snarling shapes and gleaming eyes. These rogues fought with the same coordinated precision as the ones from the gathering, trained, directed, purposeful. Two more emerged from opposite sides. I saw Caspian calculate the angles, saw the moment he realized he couldn't reach them both before one of them reached me. I grabbed a burning branch from our fire. The rogue approaching me hesitated, his fevered aggression warring with instinctive fear of flame. I used that hesitation, thrusting the burning wood at his face. He yelped and retreated, and in that moment, Caspian took down the other one with brutal efficiency. The remaining rogues seemed to realize their ambush had failed. They melted back into the darkness with that same eerie coordination, leaving behind two bodies that began shifting back to human form, the way wolves did when consciousness fled. The silence after violence felt obscene. Caspian shifted back, breathing hard. Blood, not his own, splattered across his chest and arms. His eyes found me immediately, scanning for injury. "Are you hurt?" "No." My hands were shaking, adrenaline making my voice unsteady. "You?" "I'm fine." He moved toward the fallen rogues, studying their faces with grim recognition. "I know this one. Marcus Thorne. He was part of Elena's personal guard." The revelation hung in the air like poison. Her guard? But that means someone turned members of my own pack 15 years ago, someone close enough to know our routines, our weaknesses, our blind spots. His voice was cold fury barely contained. They didn't just take her from me. They used people she trusted to do it. I knelt beside the other body, younger, maybe 25 in human years. His eyes were still open, still showing that unnatural fever brightness even in death. "Caspian, look at his eyes." He crouched beside me, and I watched his expression shift from anger to something darker. "That's not natural." "No. It's like they're being controlled somehow, driven." I'd never seen anything like it, but instinct told me this went deeper than simple rogue violence. What could do this to wolves? Blood magic? Compulsion? He stood abruptly. "We need to get back. Now. If they have the ability to turn pack members, to control them, then nowhere is safe." We broke camp in minutes, leaving the bodies for scavengers. Caspian set a punishing pace back toward pack territory, and I struggled to keep up, branches catching at my clothes, roots threatening to trip me in the darkness. "Caspian, wait." He stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with him. When he turned, his expression was anguished. "I can't lose anyone else. Do you understand? I can't." His voice broke. "If they hurt you because of me, because I brought you out here, they didn't hurt me. We survived." I reached up, cupping his face without thinking, feeling the rough stubble against my palm. "We're both alive. We learned something crucial. That's what matters." He leaned into my touch like a man dying of thirst finding water. "You should be terrified of me, of this, of what being near me brings." "I know, but you're not." "No." I smiled despite everything. Apparently, I'm terrible at self-preservation. He laughed, a broken, beautiful sound, and pulled me against him. The embrace was desperate, seeking comfort as much as giving it. I felt his heart hammering against my cheek, felt the tremors running through his powerful frame, felt the weight of 15 years of grief and guilt and isolation trying to crush him. "I won't let them hurt you," he murmured into my hair, "whatever it costs. I won't lose you too." The words should have frightened me, should have sent me running back to my safe, small life at the edge of the pack. Instead, they felt like a promise, dark and binding and irrevocable. We reached pack territory at dawn, exhausted and bloodstained but alive. Darius and Vera met us at the border, their relief quickly turning to alarm when they saw our condition. "What happened?" "Ambush," Caspian said shortly. "Organized. 7 rogues, 2 confirmed from my former pack. And there's something else, evidence of blood magic or compulsion. Someone's controlling these wolves." Vera's expression hardened. "That's a direct violation of the Accords. If we can prove, we will prove it. But first, we secure this territory." He turned to Darius. "I want every pack member accounted for and checked for signs of compulsion. Fever-bright eyes, erratic behavior, gaps in memory. Anyone showing symptoms gets isolated until we understand what we're dealing with. That's going to cause panic," Darius warned. "Panic is better than infiltration." Caspian's voice left no room for argument. As his guards hurried to implement the orders, Caspian turned to me. His expression softened marginally, the Alpha King receding to reveal the man underneath. "You need rest, real rest, in a real bed. So do you. I need to coordinate the security measures, speak with Garrett, figure out—" "Caspian." I touched his arm. "When's the last time you actually slept?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Let Darius and Vera handle the immediate concerns. You've been running on adrenaline and duty for gods know how long. Even Alpha Kings need to sleep." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise that anyone would dare order him to rest, mixed with bone-deep exhaustion he couldn't quite hide. "Where would you suggest I sleep? Garrett's lodge is hardly restful." The words left my mouth before I could consider the implications. "My cottage. It's small, but it's quiet. Private. No one will disturb you there." The silence that followed felt weighted with possibility. "That's probably inappropriate," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "Probably." I smiled. "But I think we're past appropriate, don't you?" My cottage looked smaller with Caspian nightshade standing in it. He ducked through the doorway, built for my father's height, not an Alpha King's, and surveyed the single room with its worn furniture, stone fireplace, and narrow bed that had been mine since childhood. Everything I owned visible in a single glance. Books my father had left me, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, a faded quilt my mother had made before I was born. "It's not much," I said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's honest." He touched the books, the herbs, taking in the life I'd built in the margins. "It's you." I built up the fire while he cleaned the worst of the blood from his skin using water from my basin. The domesticity of the moment felt surreal. The most powerful wolf in the territories standing shirtless in my cottage, exhaustion written in every line of his body. "The bed's yours," I said, gathering blankets. "I'll sleep by the fire." "Ember, you need real rest. The floor won't kill me for one night." He looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. He sank onto the bed with a sigh that seemed to come from his soul. "Just for a few hours, however long you need." I settled by the fire, wrapping myself in blankets, watching flames dance and cast shadows across the ceiling. Behind me, I heard his breathing slow and deepen, sleep claiming him almost instantly. I should have slept too, should have taken advantage of the relative safety and peace. Instead, I found myself thinking about everything that had happened in the past 2 days. The gathering, the attack, the forest, the confessions, the way Caspian looked at me like I was something precious and terrifying in equal measure. "Ember." His voice was rough with sleep. I turned to find him watching me, propped on one elbow. "You should be sleeping." "Can't. Not with you on the floor." He shifted, making space. "Come here." "Caspian, I don't think—" I'm not asking for anything but warmth and presence. Please. The vulnerability in that single word undid me. I sleep better knowing you're safe, knowing you're near. I should have refused, should have maintained proper boundaries. Instead, I found myself crossing the small space, slipping onto the bed beside him. He pulled me against his chest, tucking my head beneath his chin. One arm draped protectively across my waist. "This is dangerous," I whispered. "I know. People will talk. Let them." Caspian. Shh. His breath stirred my hair. "For just a few hours, can we pretend we're not an alpha king and a broken wolf girl? Can we just be two people who've been alone too long?" I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from the aching beauty of being held like I mattered, like I was worth protecting not out of duty but desire. "Yes," I whispered. "We can be that." His arms tightened around me, and in the warmth of that embrace, I finally slept. I woke to late afternoon sunlight and the sound of voices outside. Urgent, concerned. Caspian was already awake, already moving, the warrior returning even as the man who'd held me through the night lingered in his eyes. "Stay here," he said quietly. "Not a chance." He almost smiled. I didn't think so. Outside, Garrett stood with Darius and Vera, along with Elder Miriam and several pack warriors. Their expressions ranged from worried to suspicious, and I knew immediately that something significant had happened. "Alpha King," Garrett began, his voice strained. "We've completed the examination you requested. 15 pack members show signs of the fever eyes, including..." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Including 3 of my personal guards." The revelation sent ice through my veins. The infiltration ran deeper than anyone had suspected. "Isolate them," Caspian commanded. "Humanely, but securely. We need to understand how the compulsion works before we can break it." "There's more," Vera said grimly. "We found evidence of regular meetings between certain pack members and outsiders. Trade routes that don't make sense, money changing hands. Someone's been preparing this for months, maybe longer. Do we know who's coordinating it? Not yet. But," Vera's eyes flickered to me, then away. "We think the target isn't just this pack. We think they're after you, Alpha King. Using this pack as a way to draw you out, make you vulnerable." Caspian's expression went cold and dangerous. "Then they've succeeded. I'm here. I'm vulnerable. And now, we find out what they want." "My king," Darius said carefully, "perhaps you should return to the capital. Let us handle..." "No." The word was absolute. "I'm not running. I'm not leaving these people to face alone what my presence brought to their doorstep." His eyes found mine. "And I'm not abandoning those who've earned my protection." The weight of that gaze, the promise in it, made my breath catch. Elder Miriam stepped forward, her weathered face thoughtful. "Perhaps that's exactly what they're counting on, Alpha King, Your Honor. Your refusal to abandon those in need." She looked at me. "Or your attachment to certain individuals." The implication was clear. I'd become leverage, a weakness they could exploit. "Then we use that," I heard myself say. Everyone turned to stare. "If they think I'm a weakness, let them. Let them focus on me while we figure out who's pulling the strings." "Absolutely not," Caspian said immediately. "It makes sense. I'm already a target by association. At least this way we control the narrative." "No." "Caspian." I said no, Ember. His voice carried the weight of absolute command. "I won't use you as bait, even if it's the smartest tactical choice." Even then. We stared at each other, wills clashing, neither willing to bend. Around us, I felt the pack watching, calculating, seeing clearly for the first time just how much the Alpha King had come to care for their broken human cast-off. Elder Miriam broke the silence with a dry chuckle. "Well, this certainly complicates things." Before anyone could respond, a young messenger burst through the gathered crowd, breathless and wild-eyed. "Alpha King, someone's at the southern border. They're asking for parley. They say..." He swallowed hard. "They say they have information about your mate's death, about who really ordered it." The world seemed to stop. Caspian's entire body went rigid, his eyes blazing gold as his wolf surged to the surface. When he spoke, his voice was barely human. "Take me there, now." But his hand found mine as he moved, fingers intertwining, holding tight like I was an anchor in a storm that threatened to consume him. And I realized, whatever came next, we'd face it together. The southern border was marked by ancient standing stones, remnants of something older than pack territories, older than the division between human and wolf. They cast long shadows in the fading light, and between them stood a figure I recognized with a jolt of shock. Sienna, but not the Sienna who'd sneered at me during the gathering. This version stood with unnatural stillness, her eyes burning with that same fever brightness we'd seen in the rogues. Behind her, partially hidden in shadow, stood someone else, a woman whose presence made every wolf present bristle with instinctive unease. She was beautiful in the way poisonous things are beautiful, pale skin, dark hair cascading like a waterfall, eyes that held centuries of knowledge and cruelty. Power rolled off her in waves that made my teeth ache. "Caspian Nightshade," she said, her voice like honey laced with venom. "It's been a long time." Caspian's hand tightened on mine to the point of pain. Morgaine. The name was a curse. I should have known. "Should you?" She smiled, cruel and knowing. "I've been very careful. 15 years of careful planning, patient manipulation, building my network of controlled wolves one by one, all leading to this moment. Why?" The word ripped from Caspian's throat. "Elena never did anything to you." She was innocent. She was in the way. Morgaine shrugged, the gesture obscene in its casualness. "You were supposed to be mine, Caspian. We were supposed to rule together. But then you met her, that simpering, gentle creature. And suddenly all your promises meant nothing." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Morgaine wasn't just any enemy. She'd been someone Caspian knew before Elena. Someone who'd wanted him and been rejected. "I never promised you anything," Caspian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You promised me everything." For the first time, her composure cracked, revealing the obsession beneath. "Every look, every conversation, every moment we spent planning the future of our territories. And then she appeared, and you forgot I existed. So you killed her. You orchestrated an attack using my own guards, made it look like random violence, and let me live with the guilt for 15 years. I wanted you to suffer, to understand what it felt like to lose everything." Morgaine's smile returned, sharp as broken glass, but suffering made you stronger, more ruthless, more perfect. So I waited, bided my time, refined my blood magic until I could control not just one or two wolves, but dozens, hundreds eventually. "The compulsion," I whispered. Her eyes swung to me, and I felt the weight of her attention like a physical blow. "Ah, yes, the little human pet. How delicious that you've replaced Elena with something even more fragile." She laughed. "Tell me, Caspian, will history repeat itself? Will I take this one from you too?" Caspian moved in front of me, a wall of protective fury. "You won't touch her, won't I? I control 15 members of this pack, including..." She gestured, and Sienna stepped forward, moving with that horrible puppet-like precision. "Including warriors close enough to strike before you could stop them." Around us, I felt pack members shifting uneasily, unsure who among them might be compromised, who might turn on their neighbors at Morgaine's command. "What do you want?" Caspian demanded. "The same thing I've always wanted. You, your power, your throne." Morgaine's expression turned calculating. "Agree to bond with me, make me your queen, and I'll release my hold on these wolves. They'll go free, return to their normal lives, never remember what they did under my control. And if I refuse, then I trigger the compulsion in every wolf I've touched. They'll tear this pack apart from the inside. They'll hunt down everyone you care about." Her eyes found mine again, starting with her. The silence that followed was absolute. I felt Caspian trembling, not with fear, but with the effort of containing his rage. 15 years of grief and guilt and fury pressing against his control, demanding release. Around us, his warriors waited for his command, ready to fight and die on his word. But I saw what they couldn't, the calculation in Morgane's eyes, the way her fingers moved in subtle patterns. She was preparing to trigger the compulsion. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a trap designed to force Caspian into either submission or watching everyone around him destroyed, unless someone changed the equation. "Wait," I said, stepping out from behind Caspian. "Ember, no." I squeezed his hand once, then let go. Walked forward until I stood in the space between Caspian and Morgane, between safety and danger, between past and future. "You're wrong about me," I said, looking directly at Morgane. "I'm not fragile, and I'm not some replacement for Elena." "Oh?" She looked amused. "Then what are you, little human?" "I'm someone who understands what it means to be other, to not fit into the boxes people create." I took another step forward, ignoring Caspian's growled warning. "You think controlling wolves makes you powerful, but real power isn't about control. It's about choice, connection, the bonds people choose to forge, not the ones you force on them." Touching philosophy from someone who can't even shift, Morgane's voice dripped contempt. "You're right. I can't shift. I don't have claws or fangs or supernatural strength." Another step. "But I have something you don't, something you've never understood. I have people who choose to stand with me not because they're compelled, but because they want to." I felt it then. The pack behind me. Not just Caspian, but Darius and Vera, Elder Miriam, and even some of Garrett's warriors. Felt them step forward, a unified front not because of rank or magic, but because of something Morgane had lost sight of in her obsession with power. "You can take the throne," I continued. "You can control every wolf in the Northern Territories, but you'll never have what Elena had, what made Caspian love her. You'll never have genuine connection, just fear and compulsion masquerading as loyalty." Morgane's expression twisted with fury. "You know nothing. I know that even if you kill me, even if you destroy this entire pack, Caspian will never be yours, because you can't force love. You can't compel devotion, and trying to control what should be given freely just proves you don't deserve it." "Enough!" Morgane's hand moved, and I felt dark magic surge through the air like a wave. Sienna lunged for me, eyes blazing with compulsion. And Caspian was there, catching her mid-leap, holding her back with gentle strength that refused to harm even as it protected. Around us, the compromised wolves collapsed, Morgane's concentration breaking as she focused her power directly on me instead. I felt it hit like ice water in my veins, foreign and invasive, trying to grab hold of something inside me, trying to burrow into my mind and twist my will to hers. But there was nothing for it to grab onto. I was human. Her magic was designed for wolves, for the connection between human consciousness and animal instinct. I had no wolf to control, no duality to exploit. Her greatest weapon simply slid off me like water off stone. Morgane's eyes widened in shock and fury. "Impossible!" "Not impossible," Elder Miriam called out, her voice ringing with satisfaction. "Just different. You focused so much on wolves that you forgot humans have their own kind of strength." The moment of distraction was all Caspian needed. He moved with the speed and precision of a warrior king who'd spent 15 years preparing for this moment. In 3 strides, he'd crossed the distance. His hand closed around Morgane's throat, not to harm, but to contain, channeling his own alpha power to block hers. "You took Elena from me," he said, his voice barely recognizable. "You've haunted me for 15 years. You've hurt innocent people trying to hurt me." His grip tightened. "But you will never hurt anyone I love again." Darius and Vera moved in with silver chains, the kind designed to bind magic users. Within seconds, Morgane was contained, her power locked away. Her centuries of scheming ended in a forest clearing by the strength of pack working together. The compromised wolves began to wake, confusion clearing from their eyes as the compulsion broke. Sienna looked around wildly, tears streaming down her face. What happened? I don't... You're safe now," I said softly, helping her stand. "We're all safe." 3 weeks later, the world looked different. Morgane was imprisoned in the capital, her network of controlled wolves identified and freed. her threat finally neutralized. The investigation had revealed dozens of packs she'd infiltrated, hundreds of wolves she'd touched with her magic. The work of undoing that damage would take years. But tonight wasn't about work or threats or the weight of responsibility. Tonight was celebration. The pack had gathered again, not for the harvest moon, but for something simpler: gratitude. Gratitude for survival, for safety, for the bonds that had held when everything else threatened to break. I stood at the edge of the festivities, watching pack members laugh and dance, and slowly remember what peace felt like. Things had changed in the past weeks. People who'd ignored me now nodded in greeting. Warriors who'd dismissed me asked for my opinions on patrol routes through forest I knew better than anyone. Even Garrett had grudgingly acknowledged my role in stopping Morgaine. I wasn't invisible anymore, but more than that, I'd stopped wanting to be invisible. There you are. Caspian emerged from the crowd, looking less like an alpha king and more like a man learning to smile again. He'd been staying in the territory, helping coordinate the recovery efforts. But everyone knew that wasn't the only reason he remained. Here I am, I agreed, unable to suppress my smile. He took my hand, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks, and led me away from the crowd toward the forest path where this had all begun. We walked in comfortable silence until the sounds of celebration faded to a distant murmur. "I have to return to the capital soon," he said finally. "There are trials to oversee, territories to stabilize, politics to navigate." My heart sank despite expecting this. "I know, but I don't want to go without you." I looked up sharply, finding his amber eyes serious and hopeful and vulnerable in ways I'd never imagined an alpha king could be. "Come with me," he continued. "Not as my subject or my guide or any other role that diminishes what you are. Come as my partner, my equal. The person who taught me it's possible to love again without fear, Caspian. I know it's fast. I know there will be challenges, politics and protocols, and people who'll question whether a human belongs beside an alpha king." He cupped my face with both hands, his touch gentle despite his strength. "But I also know that you're the bravest, most genuine person I've ever met. That you see me as Caspian, not just a crown, and that somewhere in the past 3 weeks I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you." Tears blurred my vision. "You love me?" Desperately, completely, in ways that terrify and exhilarate me in equal measure. He smiled, soft and real. "So, yes, Ember Ashford, I love you. And if you'll have me, if you'll take a chance on a man who comes with more baggage than should be legal, I'd very much like to spend the rest of my life proving it." I thought about my small cottage, the life I'd built in the margins, thought about being invisible, about safety and smallness, and the careful way I'd learned to exist. Then I thought about standing in a clearing facing down a centuries-old witch, about fighting beside wolves despite being human, about being seen and valued and loved for exactly who I was. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll come with you." His kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected, gentle and fierce and desperate and reverent all at once. When we finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, he pressed his forehead to mine. "I should warn you," I said softly. "I can't give you what Elena could. I can't give you wolf children to carry on your bloodline. I can't shift and run with you under the full moon. I'm just human. You're not just anything." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "And as for children, one day," I interrupted, the words surprising even me as they emerged. I pulled back to look him fully in the eyes, letting him see the absolute certainty in my expression. "One day, I'll give you a child." The promise hung between us, impossible perhaps, but somehow feeling true all the same. Felt like fate spoken into existence, like the universe rearranging itself to accommodate love it hadn't planned for. "One day," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "That's a promise I'll hold you to. Then I guess you'd better keep me around long enough to fulfill it." He laughed, full and genuine and beautiful, and pulled me close again. "Oh, I plan to keep you around for considerably longer than that. Forever sounds like a good start." 6 months later, I stood in the great hall of the northern capital, wearing a gown the color of moonlight that made my pale hair shine like silver. Around me, alphas from every territory had gathered, some curious, some skeptical, all waiting to see what the Alpha King would do. Caspian took my hand, and his voice rang through the hall with absolute authority. Today, I present to you Ember Ashford, my chosen mate, my partner, and your future queen. She is human, yes, but she has proven herself through courage, compassion, and a strength that has nothing to do with claws or fangs. Any who would question her place beside me can take it up with me directly. The challenge in his voice was clear. No one spoke. Elder Miriam stepped forward, her weathered face creased with satisfaction. Then let it be known, Ember Ashford is recognized as mate and queen. May her reign be long and her wisdom guide us all. The acceptance rippled through the crowd. Not immediate, not universal, but enough. Enough to build on. As Caspian placed a circlet of silver and moonstone on my head, as the assembled alphas bowed in acknowledgement, I thought about the girl I'd been 6 months ago, invisible, broken, convinced she'd never belong anywhere. I thought about my father's words, that the strongest bonds were built on choice, not instinct. And I thought about Caspian's hand warm in mine, about the life we'd build together, complicated and challenging and more real than anything I'd ever imagined. Ready? He whispered. I squeezed his hand and smiled. With you, always. We walked forward together, an alpha king and his human queen, into a future we'd write ourselves, one choice at a time. And somewhere in the years that followed, in a nursery filled with sunlight and laughter, that whispered promise became reality. A child with pale blonde hair and amber eyes, equally human and wolf, equally mine and his, proof that love could create miracles, even destiny hadn't anticipated. But that's another story. This one ends here, with two people who'd been alone too long finally finding home in each other, with a promise kept, with a future begun, with love, messy and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for.